What's worth more, a vault full of gold or a heart full of love? In the bustling heart of Lagos, a man named Chidi Okonkwo would come to understand this truth, but only when it was far too late. The towers of Victoria Island loomed tall over Lagos Lagoon as Chidi's latest Mercedes-Benz slipped through the crowded morning streets. Behind the tinted windows, the man they called the Golden One paid little attention to the street vendors weaving between cars, selling pure water and plantain chips, the same things he once sold as a boy. At 55 years old, Chidi embodied the ultimate modern African success story. His real estate empire stretched from Lagos to Abuja. His investments spanned 3 continents, and his name alone opened doors in every boardroom. His custom-made Swiss watches cost more than most people's yearly income, and the coral beads he wore on special occasions were worth a small fortune. However, in Ajegunle, the bustling neighborhood where his journey had begun, life told a different story. In a modest, weathered compound, his parents, Papa Okonkwo and Mara Okonkwo, lived quietly. A faded, crooked photo from Chidi's university graduation, taken 25 years ago, still hung on the wall, a silent reminder of the last time their family had been home. While Chidi thrived in the world of luxury, his parents quietly lived out their days, distant from the success they had helped create. He sent money once, Mara would tell curious neighbors, still defending her son after all these years. He only managed to send 5,000 naira 3 years ago. She never mentioned how the bank charges had swallowed half of it, or how Papa Okonkwo had spent 2 days, hands shaking, just trying to navigate the paperwork. What she never shared with anyone was how they had traded their future for his. The small plot of land in their village, their only inheritance and retirement plan, was sold to pay for his university fees. The countless nights she had worked as a night guard at the local school, her arthritic knees screaming in protest. How Papa Okonkwo had taken on manual labor well into his 60s, breaking his body so his son could wear fine clothes to class. He's busy building his empire, Papa Okonkwo would say, staring off into the distance, his voice tinged with a sense of resignation. Success takes time. But even he couldn't hide the bitterness in his voice as he added, though apparently not as much time as visiting your parents. In his sleek, glass-walled office overlooking the Lagos skyline, Chidi was living his version of the Nigerian dream, everything he had ever aspired to. The luxury, the power, the respect, he had it all. His secretary, Amara, managed his meticulously curated schedule with military precision. Every minute was accounted for, every meeting optimized for maximum profit. The weight of his ambition kept him moving, relentless and focused. Sir, Amara ventured one morning, her voice cautious, your father's brother called again. He says it's urgent. Chidi barely glanced up from his tablet, his fingers scrolling through numbers with practiced ease. Tell him I'm in a meeting, he muttered without missing a beat, not looking up from the screen. Amara hesitated, sensing his indifference. He says, your mother had another fall. This time Chidi's fingers froze. He looked up, his expression briefly hardening before the mask returned. He exhaled sharply, as if the weight of it all had finally reached him. But just as quickly, he closed himself off again, burying his emotions behind his work. His empire, after all, demanded his attention. The tablet dipped slightly, a microscopic crack in the perfectly maintained facade. For a fleeting moment, the memory of gentle hands tending to his childhood fevers, the comfort of his mother's soothing voice, threatened to break through his carefully constructed walls. But before he could hold on to it, his phone buzzed with another investment opportunity. and the moment passed as quickly as morning mist evaporating in the relentless Lagos heat. "Send some money," he said finally, his tone dismissive, as if it were no more than a routine task. The usual amount. What he didn't know, or perhaps didn't care to know, was that his mother hadn't fallen. She had fainted from hunger, her body too weak to carry on, too proud to ask the neighbors for help. She had spent the last of their meager savings on medicine for Papa Okonkwo's worsening cough. She was too ashamed to admit that the usual amount from her son, what he saw as more than enough, barely covered a week's worth of medications, let alone enough to nourish her or Papa Okonkwo. Meanwhile, Chidi's own children were following in their father's footsteps, replicating his ambitions with devastating precision. Ada, his firstborn, was carving out her own empire in London, her calls home becoming more infrequent and colder with each passing year. Tairo, chasing the Silicon Valley dream in California, seemed to forget that home was where his roots lay. Their calls grew shorter, their excuses more elaborate, until even the most heartfelt greetings felt like obligations. They're focused on their careers, Chidi would tell his wife, Adana, when another family celebration passed with empty chairs around the table. He could feel the ache in his chest, a quiet pain that no amount of success seemed to ease, but he never let it show. Just like I was at their age. But Adana, wise in the ways that only African wives can be, simply raised an eyebrow and replied, her voice gentle but pointed, "And how did that work out for your parents?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Chidi could feel her eyes on him, a mix of concern and understanding, but he quickly brushed it aside with a wave, unwilling to confront the deeper sorrow of his own choices. The Hamatan season arrived with its usual fury, bringing winds that howled like ancestral spirits through Lagos's concrete canyons. The dry, dust-laden air seemed to seep into every crack of the city, turning everything it touched to a muted grey. In his opulent three-story mansion on Banana Island, Chidi, for the first time in years, felt the first tremors of something he couldn't ignore. What he assumed was just the slow encroachment of age. His hands shook when he signed documents, his signature faltering on the page. His vision blurred during board meetings, the numbers and figures on his tablet swimming in and out of focus. But pride, the ancient destroyer of great men, kept him from seeking help, from showing even the slightest vulnerability. "Just stress," he told his worried staff, his voice firm but hollow. "Just need some rest." The words were rehearsed as if he could convince himself, if not them, that everything was under control. But deep down, a whisper of doubt began to gnaw at him. Then came the night of the great storm. Lagos hadn't seen such rain in decades. It was as if the heavens themselves had decided to wash away the city's sins, cleansing it in torrents of water. The wind howled through the streets, bending trees and rattling windows, while lightning split the sky like divine judgment. In the midst of the chaos, Chidi worked late in his home office, alone as usual, his mind fixated on the endless stream of numbers and decisions. The first stroke hit like a hammer to his chest, the pain sharp and sudden. He gasped, his breath stolen before collapsing to the floor. As he fell, knocking over his desk chair, the distance to his phone, just a few meters away, seemed insurmountable. All his millions, his empire, couldn't help him now. His years of building connections meant nothing in this moment. No amount of power could make anyone hear his desperate, weakening calls for help. Hours dragged on like centuries. In the suffocating darkness, faces swam before his eyes. His parents at his graduation, their smiles proud yet weary, their clothes threadbare but their love unmistakable. His children's first steps, moments he had mostly heard about secondhand from nannies and house staff. His wife's growing distance, the way she had gradually become a stranger in their own home as he chose business dinners over family time. The realization hit him like another blow. The things that truly mattered had slipped away, while he had focused so relentlessly on things that were never meant to be his legacy. When consciousness finally returned, it was to the sterile whiteness of Lagos's most expensive private hospital. The familiar warmth of mahogany panels and the hum of his office were replaced by harsh fluorescent lights and the soft beep of medical machines. The sterile smell of antiseptic filled his nose. But the real shock came when he finally found his voice, weak and trembling, and asked about his children. "We've been trying to reach them, sir," the nurse said gently, her voice almost apologetic. "But their assistants say they're in important meetings. They'll call when they can." The words hit harder than the stroke had. They were, after all, his own words, repeated back to him like a cruel echo across the decades, now serving as a painful reminder of everything he had neglected. Recovery was slow, humbling work. Each step with the physiotherapist, though progress, reminded him of his father's quiet dignity, even when poverty had bent his back. Each spoonful lifted to his mouth by a nurse's careful hand brought memories of his mother's patient care when childhood malaria had nearly taken him. She had always been there, her love constant, even in the darkest times. But it was the silence that truly broke him. His phone, once buzzing constantly with business opportunities, now lay still on the table beside his bed. His children's messages came as brief texts, always too busy to visit, always in the middle of something important, just like he had been. In the stark, sterile quiet of his hospital room, with only the beeping machines for company, Chidi began to understand the true cost of his choices. His empire of buildings, once a testament to his success, now seemed hollow and insignificant compared to the fullness of his parents' tiny home, where love had made up for every material lack. Then came the news that shattered what remained of his carefully constructed world. To be continued in part 2. What do you think happened next? Was it too late for Chidi to make things right? Share your thoughts in the comments below. How would you handle success differently? Don't forget to like and subscribe for part 2 of this heart-wrenching tale of love, loss, and redemption.